The Hasselblad X2D and the Leica Q3 are two of the more lusted after high-end cameras on the market. Each make a promise of top-tier image quality with a minimalist user experience. But which one's right for you? Well, I've been shooting with each of them extensively for the past few months, including some head-to-head comparisons in the Desert and the Tetons. So today I want to give you my honest opinions on the strengths and shortcomings of each. Let's get into it. So I've had the Leica Q3 for close to 2 years now. It's been my everyday carry and is often the only photo camera I bring with me on a lot of my travels. But for most of this year, I've swapped that out with the X2D as my workhorse photo camera. It's the only photo camera I took with me to the Azores and on multiple trips throughout the American Southwest. We're gonna do a 10-round heavyweight style bout between these two cameras on each of the key categories to help us determine the winner. Also, this video isn't sponsored by Leica or Hasselblad, by the way, but it is sponsored by MPB, which we'll get to in a minute. Let's start off with one of the most important things to a lot of people, the color. Now, I actually loved the color from the Q3 until I shot on the X2D. The Q3 has that classic Leica rendering. There's a unique mix of contrast, micro contrast, and rendering that gives it this really classic polished vibe. It's sharp, but not too clinical, moody, but not muddy. However, there is a notable magenta bias that's hard not to notice. Now, you can fix it in post. That's certainly something that you get used to over time, but at this price point, I really wish you didn't have to, especially when you compare it to the X2D, which has some of the best colors I've seen straight out of a camera. The X2D gives you 16-bit raw files, which means more tonal depth and a smoother gradation between colors. I find that especially true with the blues and the greens, which can be a unique challenge for many. Now, if you're primarily sharing on social media or heck, even watching this YouTube video, are you gonna notice? Probably not a ton. And while the Q3 does still look great, don't get me wrong, the X2D is in a league of its own. So we're gonna have to give the point to Hasselblad on this one. Next up, let's talk portability. The Q3 certainly takes the cake on this front. This camera is the bring it everywhere camera. I often describe it as the moments that matter camera because it's there for all those unplanned real life moments where you really want a great quality image without lugging around a big cumbersome camera. It's compact, it's discreet, it's ready the second you need it, and I love that it can operate everything with just one hand, which is great for not only those unplanned moments, but also myself as a hybrid shooter. I often have my FX3 in one hand filming, and then I just wanna quickly pull up and snap a photo as well. The X2D, on the other hand, it's a bit of a commitment. It is really compact for being a medium format camera, and most of the lenses are on the smaller side, but it's just not something you're gonna be walking around with on your shoulder for those just in case type moments. But what about the ergonomics? The Q3 might be smaller, but ergonomically, it's not the best. It basically has no grip, so you're gonna end up needing to buy extra accessories, like a thumb grip, just to make it comfortable to hold. And those add-ons are honestly pretty expensive. Like I think the thumb grip I use is $270 or something like that. The X2D, on the other hand, it feels incredible in your hand. The grip is deep, it's nice and sculpted in a way that's really made for long shooting sessions. This doesn't necessarily go in the ergonomics bucket, but I wanted to keep it to 10 things, so we'll talk about it now. The X2D's image stabilization is truly the best of any camera I have ever used. I've done multiple 1+ second exposures, completely handheld, and they are tack sharp. Like I haven't need to use a tripod for any of my seascape photography on the X2D, and while the Q3's stabilization is definitely good, it is nowhere near the level of the X2D. So maybe 1.5 to Hasselblad on that one. Next up, let's talk autofocus. Now, neither of these cameras is winning any awards for autofocus. Let's just get that out of the way up front. If you want the latest and greatest autofocus, stick to Sony, Nikon, Canon, their fancy AI chips, that type of thing. But between these two, the Q3 is definitely more reliable. It has a hybrid system, so both phase and contrast detection. And while it's by no means perfect, like there's times when it sees a face in like a random rock or something like that, it is much more snappier, it's more accurate, and there are more scenarios in which it's gonna have a higher hit rate for you. The X2D, by comparison, it's just okay. It relies solely on phase detection, and honestly, it feels like it's multiple generations behind all of the other flagship camera brands. I almost exclusively use the small point autofocus mode and then select exactly what I want to focus on, and even then it can struggle in lower light or poor contrast scenarios. There's also annoyingly no good way to set up back button autofocus on the X2D. Like you sort of can, but then it disables the face detection, which just super annoying. Often it'll register that it's grabbed focus, like the box turns green, and then you review the image later and it has completely missed. I will say that sort of false green issue is almost always on the 38V. I've tried many other X2D lenses at this point and never had that particular issue on anything except the 38V. And it's also not just my copy. I've had it happen on 2 others as well. Either way, Leica for sure takes the point on this one. Now, both of these cameras are obviously very pricey, but I almost always leverage my used gear to help fund new cameras like these. If you've ever tried to sell gear online, you know the feeling. And for those of you who've been around the channel long enough, you remember when I got scammed out of over $4,000 trying to sell my Leica Q2. So we're just not dealing with that anymore. Instead, I've been dusting off the shelf and doing some spring cleaning of my used gear with MPB, which is the largest global platform to buy, sell, and trade used photo and video gear. But even better, it's safe and easy, and you don't have to deal with the hassle of going back and forth with people trying to trade 3 used tires in exchange for your Hasselblad. All you gotta do is list your gear, get an instant quote, pack it up, and then they'll even pick it up for you from your front door. No more waiting in a parking lot for some random stranger on the internet. And not only does it give your gear a second life, but you can even trade your gear for gear that you've been lusting after for a while. Like they have Q3s and X2Ds available for way less than the list price. So dust off those shelves, clean out the gear closet, pop over to MPB with the link in the description, and make a bit of money while you're at it. And a huge thank you to MPB for being a sponsor of today's video. Now, I think it's probably a good opportunity to shift gears and talk about lenses. The Q3 has a built-in 28mm f1.7 Summilux that is stunning. It's fast, it's sharp, it has great micro contrast, and it has 0 distortion or vignetting. I'm pretty sure this is due to being a fixed lens and the Q3 is doing in-camera corrections. Now, I've also mentioned this a few times on previous videos about the Q system, but even though it's labeled as a 28, it's actually a bit wider than that. For my personal style, adventure, landscapes, things like that, where I like having a little bit more context, I think it fits really well for me. But that's all you get, one lens. If you want something tighter, you've got frame lines at 35, 50, 75, and 90mm equivalents to crop in on that 60 megapixel sensor. I'd say all the way up to around 75mm equivalent is high enough quality to be really, really comfortable with. The X2D, meanwhile, is an interchangeable system, so you get access to all of Hasselblad's X2D lenses. And some of them are absolutely incredible. I mentioned I started with the 38V, which is around a 30mm equivalent, and I figured that being limited to the 28 on the Q3 and the Q2 for so many years, I would feel most at home with this focal length. But it feels oddly off to me for some reason. Maybe it's because I'm so used to the Q3 28, which isn't really a 28. Maybe it's because it's the medium format and that aspect ratio is just something I'm not used to. Whatever reason, I think it's becoming obvious. I don't really like this 38mm lens. I will probably end up swapping it for a 55, perhaps on MPB. I've since been doing a lot more shooting on the 25V, which is a 20mm full frame equivalent. It's much better suited for my needs, and that 100 megapixel sensor I can crop in like crazy, which is great. But the problem is this is a much bigger lens. Like it's, I think, only like 50 grams lighter than the entire Leica Q3. It's small from like a mirrorless camera standpoint, but it's a bigger lens, which is a bummer. And these lenses are not cheap either. I mean, they're basically comparable to like Leica M lenses, but at least on the M system, you have the advantage of vintage and third-party alternatives. And I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's related to lenses. The Hasselblad X system has leaf shutter, so the shutter is in the lens, meaning that if you use a third-party lens, there's no shutter, like mechanical shutter to use. So you can do the electronic shutter. However, the electronic shutter on the X2D is truly unusable. Even the slightest movement while you're taking a photo truly turns your images into like a Salvador Dali painting. Like it's all, the readout is so bad that it's like it's crazy. Honestly, I'm not sure which to give the point to, but I think just for the versatility, we're gonna have to give it to the X2D for having swappable lenses. Okay, so next up is overall speed and responsiveness. The Leica Q3 is super snappy. It boots up quickly, it offers faster shutter speeds due to an electronic shutter that actually works, And it's just overall a much more responsive, modern digital camera when it comes to, like lack of buffering and things like that. The X2D is definitely a bit on the slower side. It takes a little bit of time to boot up. Even in continuous shooting, in the fastest modes, you're only getting around 3 shots per second. Again, high megapixels. Makes sense, I get it. Now, I have captured some action shots on the X2D that have surprised me, so it's not like it's completely useless from a speed perspective, but neither is really built for speed. Still, I think we have to give the Q3 a nod here, even if it's just for the boot up speed alone. And don't worry, we'll talk about the menu UI stuff in just a second. But first, let's talk dynamic range. Honestly, I'm not sure if it's a dynamic range issue or a metering issue or a live preview issue, but the Leica Q3 has the same sensor as the A7CR and the A7R5, which are both fantastic from a dynamic range front. But for whatever reason, however it is that Leica has made its own tweaks to the sensor or however they're doing their metering, it's very common for you to look on the back of the screen and it looks fine, but then the highlights are blown out in the final image once you actually take the photo. It's something you get used to, and you end up just sort of like compensating by like 2/3 of a stop under. But again, for a camera at this price point, I just don't think that that should be a problem you have to have a workaround for. Compare that to the X2D, which is probably the best dynamic range I've ever used. The Q3 just feels a little bit more fragile when it comes to exposure. Throughout my time in the Tetons and the Azores specifically, I was regularly pulling detail out of both bright skies and deep shadows without any noticeable degradation. I mean, I get it, like the sensor's massive, so it makes sense that it's able to capture more light and stuff. But yeah, definitely giving the X2D the point on this one. Almost all cameras these days are hybrid cameras, because video is king. But how do these two stack up? Well, technically they don't. Technically the Q3 is a hybrid photo video camera, and the video specs were one of the major improvements from the Q2. On paper, it looks incredible. 8K log up to 30 frames per second, 4K 10-bit 422 up to 60 frames per second. All of this sounds epic, but in practice, it is unusable for anything serious. The rolling shutter is awful. The ergonomics make no sense for video. There's no mic input, and it's stuck with micro HDMI. And the autofocus, it's just like, it's not that great. I did a whole video on this where I tried to make a little short film using the Q3, which I'll link to. But honestly, this is just not a video camera. If you need a couple of shots and you can put it on a tripod, it'll do in a pinch, but please do not buy the Q3 for the video specs. The X2D, on the other hand, doesn't even try video whatsoever, which honestly I kind of find refreshing. It knows what it is. It's a great photo camera and it doesn't waste the effort on video. So yeah, obviously we're gonna have to give the point to Leica here, but I just wanna make sure it's really well known that you should not be buying this for video. Now, honestly, I think an overlooked portion of the shooting experience that a lot of folks don't really think about is the screens. That's both the actual LCD screen on the back and the one inside of the camera, like, the EVF, the viewfinder. Not only because it helps you actually see what you're doing, but I'm a firm believer that when you look on the back of the screen and you are stoked at what you see, it creates this positive feedback loop that makes the rest of the shoot go better. The rear LCD screen, it's just gorgeous. It's huge, it's responsive, it's bright. It feels like you have like an iPhone just like strapped to the back of a medium format camera. And then there's the EVF, which technically isn't the highest resolution on the market, but it honestly feels like it is just because like the size of it overall, it's really, really nice. And the two work really well in combination with each other. I do wish the X2D had a joystick for focus point selection since you're constantly moving that around. But when you look through the viewfinder, you can actually use the screen as a touch to move that around, and it's a really good implementation of it. It's so good that I often, when I was like using the two side by side, I kept on going to the Q3 and trying to tap on the screen in the same way that I could. And I was like, oh, I forgot that this doesn't work. And then you like use the D-pad and you're like, oh my gosh, this takes forever to move the freaking thing. Two qualms I have with the X2D screen setups, however. First, it takes some time when you pull it up to your eye for it to register that you've blocked the little sensor thing. So what I've started doing is when I'm going to pull it up, I'll just place my thumb over that sensor. And then by the time I get my camera up to my eye, it has switched, which is pretty dumb for how expensive this camera is. Now the Q3's screen and EVF, they are still solid. They're bright enough and functional, and the LCD screen is also one of the better built options out there. I think if you look at them in a vacuum, you'd be super hyped on the Q3 setup. It's just that when you compare it to the massive screen and EVF of the X2D, that's where they start to feel a little bit inadequate. But either way, I think we're gonna have to give the point to the X2D. Next up, we have just the overall user experience and UI. Honestly, I think these are both well ahead of the rest of the camera world. Both UIs are simple, intuitive, easy to navigate, and give you just enough customization without being overly complex. I do have a slight preference to the X2D's larger icons, and maybe it's a little bit more responsive, but not enough to complain about on the Q3. From an app perspective, I implore any camera brand that is listening or watching this video, which you're probably not, just take notes. This is how you build apps. The Leica Photos app is clean, it's fast, it actually works, it actually connects and remembers your camera and stuff. You can transfer RAWs quickly, you can preview images, you can update firmware, you can download the Leica Looks. Huge fan of the new Leica Chrome one, by the way. And it feels like an extension of the camera and something that was like actually designed by a high-end app developer, not just another camera company. The Hasselblad Focus mobile app is similarly very slick. It's a little bit less feature-rich, but you can still download the full resolution RAWs from the X2D. They have a really great built-in native editor that's really good for noise reduction as well. Or you can even just send things really quickly to Lightroom Mobile for some on-the-go edits. Also worth shouting out, USB-C charging, both cameras do it. It's just such a simple thing, but it makes a huge difference. I will mention the X2D is really dumb because it doesn't give you a separate charger for the batteries, which, you know, I know we're trying to save the environment stuff, but this camera is expensive enough. Just toss a camera charger in there. On this one, I think we'll just give points to both because the user experiences on both are great. So which one should you get? Well, if we take a look at our scoreboard, we've got a 6-5 score in favor of the Hasselblad X2D. So if we're going purely from a quantitative perspective, that's the pick. But honestly, the real answer for most people is probably neither. At least neither of these should be your only camera. These are both pretty niche tools. They're expensive, they're limited in functionality. Honestly, they're kind of ridiculous in the best way possible, but they serve different purposes. If you want the best image quality you can get, I do think the X2D is the one. The files are incredible, albeit very massive, like your computer better be able to handle some big files. The design, it's inspiring, and it's genuinely created some of my favorite images. But if you want a camera that will actually be with you in the moments that matter, I think the Q3 is unbeatable. It fits into your life in a way that the X2D just never will. It's fast, it's compact, it's fun to shoot with, and the image quality you get is still close to world class. Plus, it is cheaper. So what do you think? Which would you choose? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.